Hey there, I'm Kathy with the Traveling Homesteader. It's officially the new year, and I'm really kind of excited about this year. Um, since it's the beginning of the year, I just wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of a oomph or encouragement. I know at the beginning of every year, a lot of people make different New Year's resolutions or goals. I have a tendency to try to do more goals at the beginning of the year, but I look at the whole year and I try to, with the insight of a friend of mine from a few years ago, a woman I got to know, Kathleen, and her husband, she once told me that they actually sit down at the beginning of the year and forecast their budget for the whole year. And I never thought of that. And people probably do it all the time. But at that point, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought to do my budget for the whole year. And she happened to have a garden and a property. And so I found it interesting that she would actually start at the beginning of the year and put a budget to her garden. They knew what they'd already planted and they knew what they wanted to plant again. And so they knew they wanted to add more. So they budget for the new things that they wanted to get. And they would budget for other things as well. So if they needed, I don't know, a new thing for the house, whether it was, a roof or the plumbing or whatever, they would sit down and try to look at the year and see what they could afford when. And on one hand, it kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh, okay. So now I try to do that every so often, just one time a year, whether it's in June or January or December, whenever. I try to sit down and I say, okay, how much am I spending? Where can I do better? And so with that in mind, my goal this year for the financial department is to try to save some money. And a couple of days ago, I ended up seeing on YouTube this woman who had actually saved $5,050 through this 100 envelope challenge. And so I took it up. So nuts and bolts, 100 envelopes having a number on each envelope, 1 through 100. And so if there's 1 or 40 or 81, you put the dollar amount of that's on the envelope. So in this case, $1 goes in this envelope. $9 goes in this envelope. $62 goes in that envelope. So you then fill each of the envelopes with that dollar amount. And by the end of it, 1 through 100 will total up to $5,050. And I thought, whoa, that's a stash of cash. That's nothing to sneeze at. I want to try that. Now, this woman happened to do it in August through December. That's when her block of time that she did it in. You could probably do it in a year. You could probably do it in 3 months. However much time you want to block out, you can do that. I'm going to try to do it by June so that I can try to do it twice this year. That's my goal. So I'm looking to try to do a financial goal, but then also a little bit of an education goal. So if you remember right, in Self Reliance, I think that there are 5 different areas that we can learn how to become more self-reliant. Finances, education, food storage, gardening and CSAs, and emergency preparedness. Now, for me, I kind of am leaving my traditional education aside. Because for me, I've gotten my high school diploma, my bachelor's degree, and my master's degree. Part of my finances is to pay off that bloomin' master's degree. So I'm trying to get that side of my education bought and paid for. But I always like to learn a little bit more on the side about different things. I've taken some certs training, some first aid training. I took a bookmaking class one time. So I really like learning new and different things. So this year's little bit on education is I want to learn how to do leather work. Now I just find it interesting because I happen to ride horses, and when I was in high school, I got my first pair of chaps and I really liked them. And over the years, I've actually gotten to the point where I want to make my own chaps. So I thought, well, why not try it? If I'm going to make and so I'm going to learn how to do some leather work to see if I can actually make my own chaps. That's going to be down the road a bit, but that's kind of the idea. So if you get the opportunity to learn how to do something, learn how to make something that's applicable to your life. If you don't want to make, I don't know, if you don't want to have anything leather because you're a vegan, don't learn how to do leather work. Maybe you would rather learn how to make, I don't know, tofu, or you'd rather learn how to make something else. You'd rather make, I don't know, different food items that could help you be more healthy. But make something that's applicable to your life so you can kind of appreciate it. But that's also a skill that you can use to trade with other people. Because, we all know now that with the economy the way it is and the way jobs have been coming and going, people are kind of looking at life a little differently. And so if you have an opportunity to learn a skill that you could trade with somebody, that's probably going to help you out more in the long run than something else. Like, for example, the church I belong to really promotes learning skills to help do what you can to earn some money. So one woman, actually several women I know, ended up learning how they became beauticians, and they learned how to cut hair and dye hair. And for each of them, that ended up being a real saving grace because they were able to go and get a job when their husbands weren't able to. And so their husbands may have been in school or they had been laid off from their jobs. And so the wives were able to then go and cut hair and earn some money along the way to help pay the bills while their husband looked for jobs. But another woman I know, actually somewhat recently, her husband, about a year ago, ended up losing his job. They kind of saw it coming, and so she started looking for work. I have to give her credit because she was pretty awesome on this. She looked at McDonald's, she looked at a hardware store, she looked at a shoe store, she looked all around, and she ended up having 4 or 5 kids at home that were all under the age of 13. And so while she was looking for work, her husband was also sprucing up his resume and doing his part to do unemployment, but they essentially switched roles. He was a stay-at-home mom. She was the working dad, so to speak. For a period of time, they switched roles until he was able to go and find a job that suited what he needed to do to be able to make the money he needed to do to support his family. And so she ended up getting a job at a local hardware store and was doing that for several months. He was able to get a job as a postman, and so as he was able to get into his post job, she was able to phase out of her job, and now she's back staying at home with her kids and taking care of that. So that's a thing where it's life. Things like that happen. And so when we have an opportunity to go and take a job where using the skills that we can learn, that's going to help us out a lot. And so with that in mind, think of something that could be an applicable skill, but also fun. You don't want to do something that's completely dull and boring. Like for me, I'm not into numbers. I'm really not. So I'm probably not going to take an accounting class because I might take a personal finance class to know how I could better take care of my own finances. But I'm not going to go do somebody's accounting. That's just not for me. I just don't do that. So I'd rather do something with my hands, learning something, about farming or about, art or something like that. So to do something that you find is interesting but useful as well. So if you want to take a class, you might consider taking a class at a local community college. Like we have a couple of community colleges local to me with a community section that has a lot of cool classes. They're not credit, but you can learn how to do watercolors. You can learn how to speak another language. You can help with driver's ed. You can, if you don't know how to drive, you can take a driver's ed class. So that's kind of the cool thing about learning how to do different things. So you can go to a community college class, or one thing that I'll point out that I kind of like is a website called instructablescom. Now, I bring out my binder here because I love Instructables. If you have not heard of instructablescom, please go check it out. It is an awesome little website, and you can learn how to do all sorts of things. And I've actually printed out probably at least 100 or more Instructables. In this case, it's custom leather laptop sleeve. Ironic, that's what I want to learn how to do this year. And then twin cutting boards. You can learn how to make wood cuttings. You can learn how to do cooking, knitting, tinker card stuff. You can learn how to do just about anything on instructables.com. And part of the reason why I print them out is so that I could have them to reference anytime I want. And it's like my own little encyclopedia. It's a quick reference thing for me. So if you get an opportunity to get a 3-ring binder and just punch holes in them, or you can even do get plastic sleeves to put them in, help it out. That's something else you can do too. You can also look to things like Skillshare.com or Teachable.com. There's a lot of websites that you can go to that are free. There are a lot of sites that you can go to that you can pay for. Skillshare is another one that has more art-related items or making things. So they're just kind of cool things that you can learn. But something else that you might want to consider is if you're interested in doing more financially stable things, like one of my goals is saving up some money this year, you might want to consider looking into Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, if you haven't checked it out. He also has several YouTube. He has a YouTube channel that you can listen to some of his podcasts through. He has a lot of good things that you can learn about for a whole host of financial topics. One thing that I'm going to add actually to this is just some things that I find that a lot of people right now are really concerned about their finances and having a hard time getting food. And in my mind, having lived other places, I've lived in China and I've been to Mexico and the Caribbean. It's really, on one hand, hard for me to understand that we're in such an abundant country and people aren't able to get enough food. But I think part of it is our mindset. And I don't want to put blame on anybody, because sometimes we find ourselves in situations that we didn't expect. And so that's the thing that I don't want to place blame on. But you have the ability to kind of control some of the things that you do and are able to plan. So if you have an opportunity to look at what you earn and how to get food, realize that there's, help. You can get financial help for food from food pantries. You can get financial help through electrical companies that, if you need help paying for certain bills, like electric bills, water bills, utility bills, you can get help through your local utility companies in some cases. But you also have the ability to not use as much, or to make things go a little bit further. And so one of the things that I keep hearing in some of the Facebook groups that I belong to is that they just don't have enough food to get through point A to point B, or they're looking for some creative ways to prolong their food they do have. And so some things that you may want to consider is buying in bulk instead of buying individually packaged items. And so I'll go through some of that in a little bit here. But realize that you have an opportunity to kind of do things yourself, and you can control what you do and don't do. And so hopefully, with that in mind, we'll be able to set you up for some good things. in your local store, you may want to check out some of the bulk section, like here. This is our local store, Winco, has a great bulk food section. And I mean, you can get everything from long rice, basmati rice, brown basmati rice, long grade brown rice, all sorts of different varieties of rice. And it has a nice variety, which is kind of nice. And by going to the bulk food section, you can see here in some cases it's really rather cheap per pound. So kind of knowing what you can get for what money is really a good thing. And remember that you have options that, in this case, blue means organic. When you see a green sign here, it means it's on sale. But the white signs usually mean it's the regular price. But like rotini pasta at 80 cents a pound is not a bad price. You know, large shell pasta at $1.38, pretty decent. The nice thing about here is that they actually also have different foods like couscous, the Israeli style, versus the regular color. But they also have, if you need to look for specific diet restrictions, even like gluten-free. So they have like brown rice pastas, white rice pastas, that sort of thing, which is actually kind of nice. Even having things like bulk cheeses, the hard cheeses like Parmesan cheese is kind of nice. So something that's an easy, quick thing to do that I learned from a restaurant owner actually is taking these Mayakoba beans, which are really rather a reasonable price at $1.35 a pound, in addition to getting some pinto beans, which are 83 cents a pound, and combining them, soaking them overnight or for the 6 to 12 hours, and cooking them together in a slow cooker for better, basically refried beans. And that you can use in a whole host of things: burritos, tacos, nachos. You can use it as a filler in different things, dips. So that's something to consider too, that when you're looking to do things on the cheap, because right now a lot of people are really worried about their food and they don't have a whole lot of money, and that's something that can go really a far ways. Something else you might want to consider is, it's a little bit more old school, but lentil soup. You can do lentil soup and do the red lentils or the split peas. Either one is good, and that's something that gives you a little variety. I have a tendency to go for a little bit more different cultures to see what different foods I can get for cheap. And in fact, I'm here at my local store today, and I'm putting together some things for sushi. And it's nothing spectacular or great. I learned how to make it very non-professionally for really fairly little money. So now that we've seen some different things that we can do at the store, how to save some money, one thing last that I might just put to you is that you might want to consider getting your own recipes. Now, when I say getting your own recipes, I think of it as like kind of doing your own cookbook. Now, I'll show you mine. So, a few years ago, I decided to do something like this, where I just have, this happens to just be a coupon folder, and has a lot of different sections. I decided just before I went to China that I wanted to bring some of my own recipes from home with me to China, so I can make some things there without having to go through too much effort. And the requirement I had for myself was that I had to be able to fit it on an index card. So in this case, I ended up using the front side and the back side of any given card. And so in this case, like the zucchini ravioli, I found this happened to be since I was in China, but the zucchini ravioli has this side and that side, and that's all it is. It's a fairly easy recipe, but it doesn't use pasta. And so for me, I'm trying to not have as much bread and gluten. So I tried to find more recipes that had more vegetables and or gluten-free recipes for things. And so that's why the zucchini ravioli is actually using the zucchini as the outer layer for the ravioli instead of pasta. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But then I ended up finding another recipe for lemon, garlic, butter, steak, and broccoli, which looked pretty good. And that's a little bit longer, but still fit in my requirements. It had to be the front and back side of any given card. It couldn't be any longer, or else it was going to get separated, and I didn't want that. So I've ended up finding breakfasts, lunches, dinners, salads, main meals, side dishes, and I have probably over 100 recipes from various different places that just looked interesting to me. In fact, one series of recipes that I found really helpful was through Jamie Oliver. He had a 5-ingredient show for a little bit. There's a lot of recipes with 5 ingredients. So that's another thing. Having too many more than that ingredients, to me, it gets excessive sometimes. So in the case of some of his things, I mean, like one of the ones I remember doing with him is he had basically a whole chicken, a can of coconut milk, a container or a bottle of Thai curry sauce, and then a squash. It was a butternut squash. And I forget what the 5th one was now. But basically 5, and then some water, and maybe it was like, I guess it was water. I think the 5th ingredient was water. You put those in a crock pot, let it perk for, 5 hours, take out the carcass, and there you go. You have a nice coconut chicken curry soup. So I'm just up for ease. So with that in mind, you might want to consider doing something like this, having your own index card recipes to then just have something easy peasy that you can reference anytime. But then also things that you can have on a budget. Like I have a recipe here for naan bread, which is rather easy to make. So with that in mind, I hope that this video helps you to have some new goals to create for yourself this year. And remember that becoming more self-reliant doesn't happen overnight. And so hopefully you can find a means to have a couple of goals this year to become more self-reliant in your finances, education, gardening or CSAs, emergency preparedness, or in food storage. And so welcome to this year, and I look forward to seeing you again. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe down below. And remember that coming through the YouTube channel helps out a ton. And so if you want to leave comments down below, I really appreciate the feedback. Come give feedback. I'm interested in knowing what you'd like to learn and know more about. So keep me posted and keep coming back. I look forward to seeing you again soon.